From Argosy Magazine, November 1971. What does a captain tell his three-man crew before launching on an 8,500-mile voyage or odyssey across the treacherous Pacific? It might be, give your life to the raft. If we reach Australia safely, then you take your life back again. Across the Ocean on a Balsa Raft by Captain Vital Alsar. We were an international crew, myself, a 37-year-old Spaniard, Mark Modena, French, aged 44, Gabriel Salas, Chilean, 27, and Norman Tret-Renault, Canadian, who was 26. 4 men, 3 parrots, and 2 male cats, launching an incredible odyssey across the wild Pacific, 8,500 miles from Ecuador to Australia, in a 48-foot raft we named La Balsa. We left Guayaquil on May 29, 1970, planning initially to steer south of the Galapagos Islands, lying 600 miles west. The first week I became sick with bronchitis, and it seemed to get worse instead of better, but the second week in July, I was completely fit again. After 45 days of agony, that is. 2 birds and 1 of our cats succumbed to the same disease during this period. The crew of La Balsa had dwindled to 6. The current carried us slowly westward, about 35 miles each day, with little wind. On June 24th, however, we came into the southeast trades, and by the first week of July, we were able to maintain a speed of 3 knots while the wind was constant. Our record speed on the voyage was 6.5 knots, and our best daily run was 132 miles. The shortest was only 15 miles. The logs sank exactly halfway below the water level when the raft was empty, and 4 inches above the halfway mark when the craft was fully loaded with cargo and crew, a little over 3.5 tons. In calm seas, a man standing on the bow was only 11 inches above water. In rising seas, he might suddenly find himself in water to his shoulders. And on July 13th, we passed 142 degrees and 5 west, the longitude of Kon-Tiki's landfall on Rora Reef after its 4,300-mile voyage from Peru. La Balsa took 62 days compared with Kon-Tiki's 101, and we passed Raua 1,000 miles to the north. The sharks were always with us. They snatched up everything that fell from the raft. An empty can, a shark was there. A piece of wood, a shark was there. They were always waiting. And during the voyage, we harpooned about 100 sharks, 30 killed and 70 wounded. The reason for killing so many was that they scared the edible fish away from the raft. We had to protect our natural refrigerator if we were to survive. We all had our special jobs to do. I was the navigator and radio operator. Mark looked after the ropes and rationing of the food and water. Norman handled the motor, and Gabriel looked after the gasoline, oil, and kerosene for the lamps. Each day, 1 man did all the cooking, serving, and washing up. When necessary, everyone worked on the sail. At night, there were 4 watches. The last man on watch was also cook and washer for the day. The others fished. If you caught a fish, someone else had to clean and fillet it. In the 3rd week of August, we were becalmed. No wind, no current, and the raft traveled very slowly. We played a lot of parcheesi and canasta, and the days were very, very long. When the sun rose on September 12th, we saw Savai Island, Western Samoa, the first land sighted since leaving the Galapagos 13 weeks before. La Balsa was met by a launch in Satawa Bay, and we went ashore and stayed there all the next day. A Sunday, eating meals with some of the Americans visiting Samoan houses and taking pictures of the beautiful Samoan girls. At 2:30 the following morning, we were towed out to sea again. A wind began from the south later that morning, and we were able to clear the point of Savai. We wanted to sail to a lower latitude from Savai, but the wind kept pushing us northwest. It blew stronger and stronger. By the end of the day, the waves were 20 feet high. The northwesterly direction was bad for us because 60 miles ahead lay Pasco Bank, where the sea is only 30 feet deep, and in bad weather, the waves take up all the water and bang it down again. Not only were all the reefs and banks of our voyage between Samoa and Australia, but so were nearly all the storms. It was here we had to steer our way past 10 different reefs, no fewer than 9 of them by night, and our navigation could not be wrong. At first, it was the storms we worried about most. On our second day out from Savai, the waves rose to more than 30 feet. Wind and waves continued like this for the next 3 days, and at times the wind velocity was as high as 40 miles an hour. Unless you have been in a bad sea on a small craft, you cannot understand what it is really like. When waves are more than 30 feet high, they don't break, but when the wind is very strong and the wave curls over on itself, the noise is terrible, and the whole sea is white. The floor of our little cabin was often at a 45-degree angle, and the danger of capsizing was always imminent. All we could see through the cabin door was water, and often the waves burst through the door and window. On September 17th, the storm was still raging, and our position was bad. After working on the cordage in this weather, your fingers are so sore that you cannot open them. We passed Pasco Bank safely on September 15th, despite the storm, and 3 days later we passed Isabella Bank. Finally, on the 19th, the wind changed direction just in time to let us head for the northern coast of the Fijian Islands. Vanuatu-Levu and Viti-Levu then sail as vertical as possible, passing south of New Caledonia. There would be fewer islands this way, and we would miss Australia's Great Barrier Reef. The sun came out, and the sky and the waters were a beautiful blue, and we were happy again. We had won another battle with the sea. Every day we felt more and more respect for this immense natural force, but we were not afraid of it. On October 30th, we traveled 40 miles and entered the first Australian currents. There was no wind, and we moved about very carefully, making little noise so that as to not waken our enemy, the 150-degree wind from the south. Reflecting in the silence, I took stock of our voyage thus far, which had now lasted 5 months, 2 weeks, and a day. We had lost all 3 birds and 1 cat through illness. The sea had taken 6 of our 7 knives and 4 of the 7 kerosene lamps we had hung about the raft. The cabin had been filled with water 5 times, and we had all been washed overboard at least once, except Gabriel Minute. The cat had fallen or been washed overboard 5 times. We had lost 20% of our canned fruit to the sea, but we could have lost more. Our charts and navigation tables had survived, as had the dress suit Mark had brought with him. He likes to have a suit with him when he lands, and he packed this one in a plastic bag. The voyage had not harmed us. We were all still physically fit. Our arms and shoulders had more than enough exercise on the cordage, and we kept our legs fit with gymnastics. For the rest of our bodies, there was yoga exercises. And by the time we got to the Australian coast, we would have food left for only 2 days, and water for 5. During the voyage, we had received food and drink from 3 ships. The objectives of our journey were, first, to demonstrate that it is possible to steer a raft accurately, and that a balsa raft retains its buoyancy over long distances. The French raft explorer Eric de Bisschop, who died in 1958 after a voyage from Peru to the Cook Islands, believed in circular migration from Peru to Polynesia and back again to South America by west to east currents. I wanted to show that balsa logs were capable of this distance, and one day I may also undertake such a round-trip journey by myself. Our second objective was to gather information about water and air temperatures and atmospheric pressure for the Department of Marine in Mexico. We took readings every day and passed the data to Mexico via radio. Our final objective was to show that the sea, for all its immense power, need not be feared. It also showed that 4 people as diverse as the 4 of us on the balsa could live together for 5 months in harmony and mutual respect. On November 4th, the sun came up at 6:30 and I saw land, the southern tip of Fraser Island. "Look," I shouted, "there's Australia," and we all jumped in the air and were very happy. This was the best moment of the entire voyage. We arrived in the estuary of the Mooloolah River shortly after midnight. It was November 5th by our calendar, but we had not counted the day skipped crossing the international date line. At Mooloolah, the date was November 6th. Not counting the lost day, or the few minutes after midnight at our arrival, the Odyssey had taken us 160 days. We had given our lives to the raft, and now we could take them back.